Before Darrell was to load up the 9 remaining refugees from Ridge Creek and bring them back to Wood Creek. Joe was to interrogate and vet each one of them, one by one. I hoped saving and sparing them would now give them a reason and a purpose to stand with us and fight with us in the name of liberty. I asked Joe how we'd determine if any or all of the 9 would be coming home with us. He told me he'd received extensive training in the Army, joking he was a human lie detector test. He knows what to look for, and if all else fails, we have a creek full of water. We'd waterboard them. Joe said on average, CIA officers who allowed themselves to be tested upon lasted an average of 14 seconds. These people here are malnourished, sleep-deprived, scared, and in shock. They won't last more than 4 seconds before breaking. All 9 were seated in the wagon behind the tractor. Darrell stood guard, armed with a Remington Model 870 shotgun. Joe would pull them out one at a time, inside an empty camper, and interrogate them. My job was to go camper to camper, finding any supplies I could, as darkness had now set in. By sunset, we'd be out of here and hopefully never setting foot here again. The first location I stepped foot in, without question, had to be Ryan's camper. The entire rear was filled with water, pop, beer, food, and ammunition. He was enjoying the fruits of his labor, starving his camp out, making them fight and ultimately die. As I looked in the front bedroom, I saw shackles made out of rope on each side of the queen-size bed. Obviously, he had no issue sexually assaulting, abusing, and preying upon the women that were part of this camp. Ridge Creek may have taken in these villains out of charity, or maybe they just showed up and took over and victimized the patrons. We'd find out once Joe interviewed the survivors. Many people, given the choice between an urban versus rural SHTF, would take the rural setting. Many think they'll be safer from the anarchy by being far away in the country. But don't think you can't be visited by roving gangs like Ridge Creek was. We'd repelled the horsemen of war, but famine and pestilence are riding forward with the cold of winter, and death would always remain in our midst. As I walked out the camper of atrocious horrors, I went one by one, emptying each one of any and all supplies I could find. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I stumbled upon a fire pit with a familiar carcass of a once domesticated pet. Famine has always been defined as a severe shortage of food that results in starvation and increased mortality. The major cause of this famine was our electrical grid collapsing and the country going dark. I had always heard stories of dog meat consumption in China, Korea, and Vietnam, but to see it being done with my own eyes in the United States of America just reinforced to me how fast the world fell apart. If they hadn't indulged in cannibalism here yet, it looked like they were only days away from actually doing so. Forced to fight, forced to eat their own pets, this was a heinous campsite of horrific horrors. I didn't dare interrupt Joe vetting the survivors. I knew there was a method to his madness. Whether he said they'd come with us or they'd die, I trusted his instincts and his decision. It was his decision and his decision solely. Without him by my side, I'm not sure we would have come out on top of this battle. I needed to head back to retrieve the Bronco and trailer to load up the food, water, beverages, guns, ammunition, medical supplies, blankets, clothing, and everything else I could gather. This time I'd stick to the main road, skipping out on navigating the booby trap trail in the dark. I asked Darrell how many bodies had been recovered back at our camp of our own dead. It's not good, Brian. Last count I got was 16 deceased and 7 more injured. Before the attack, we stood at 50 members inside our community. At the very least, that number had dropped to 34, a 32% drop in our population in just one short day. Darrell then said that the one remaining attacker still had not been located and accounted for yet. Okay, Daryl, I'll be back in 35 to 40 minutes with a trailer as I patted him on the left shoulder. The 2 mile journey back would take me 15 to 20 minutes at a slight jog. My stomach rumbled as I jogged back. It had been 10 plus hours since I last ate at breakfast this morning. The previous 5 weeks combined had not equaled the bloodshed and death that today had. I feared instead of burying our dead, we would now have to resort to burning them because of the vast number we had lost. As I approached our front entrance, I spoke over the walkie to let our security team know it was me and not a hostile. Surviving 5 weeks of Armageddon only to be gunned down by friendly fire was not in my plans. I stopped and asked for an update on our casualties and info on the lone marauder. 17 dead now. We had lost another one, and still no sign of the last gunman. Wood Creek was obviously still in a heightened state of emergency. A thorough camper-by-camper search had not turned up any concrete evidence of the last plunderer. The 17 dead bodies had all been moved up just outside the rec hall until we could do a positive identification of every body. We needed to do our own autopsy investigation, make sure of how all 17 died. We had recovered all the weapons used, along with the spent shell casings, all except the one who was still on the loose. We had acquired quite the stash: 2 Remington 870 shotguns, a Ruger 1022, a Glock 19, a bolt-action Remington 700, a Winchester Model 70, and a non-compliant New York State Bushmaster modular semi-automatic AR-15. What I wouldn't give for a reloading press kit for our arsenal. When the ammunition would eventually run dry, we'd have some pretty expensive hammers. As I approached our cabin, I was met with a double hug from both my daughters. "Dad, are you home for good?" they both asked. My wife knew I wasn't as she stood in the entrance to our cabin. "Almost, girls," I said. "I've got to go back and help Daryl and Joe. I need the truck and the trailer to do so." "Is the killing and death over?" my 8-year-old asked. All I could muster up as a response was, "For tonight it is, sweetheart. The bad guys are gone. We rescued some good ones, and we're going to bring them back to stay here at Wood Creek." I attached the trailer to the Bronco and promised I'd be back by the time they all woke up in the morning. "Promise, Daddy?" my youngest asked. "I promise, Nougat," I replied. "I've been calling her Nougat since she outgrew the Pebbles nickname, as she was a spitting image of that character from the Flintstones." As I turned the key over on the Bronco, I was hit with an eerie feeling. This was my first time driving at night in over 5 weeks. I pulled the knob on the dash, turning the headlights on, and set off back to Ridge Creek. It was now somewhere past midnight, and we still had work to do. It was a 5 to 7 minute drive back. After we pillaged any and everything that would be of use to us, I planned on burning everything to the ground inside Ridge Creek. Eliminate the infrastructure and resources, and guarantee no one else showed up next to us. A half mile from my destination, I saw something out the corner of my right eye. Someone moving throughout the overgrown brush. I turned the Bronco 45 degrees, lighting up the brush and pines with the headlights. There he was, the last dirtbag that was part of the attack on us and claimed the lives of 17 people, including 5 innocent children. Now facing someone that was part of a group of mass murderers, my heart was jacked, but my hands were steady. With the headlights still on, I took off after him. He had a good 100-foot jump start on me, but I was determined to end his life and make sure he wouldn't live to see the morning sunrise. He was armed, but must have been out of ammo. He didn't even try engaging me. He just fled deeper and deeper into the woods. I couldn't risk him escaping and bringing back another gang of thugs to take from us and kill us. As the pursuit continued, he made the fatal mistake, clotheslining himself on a protruding tree branch, giving me the opportunity to close in and terminate the final threat of the 8 original assailants. Joe had heard the gunshot, called out over the walkie. "Everything is good, Joe. I came across the last asshole on my way back. He's departed now. I'll be there in 5, my friend." Joe had come to the conclusion that all 9 refugees had passed his interrogation and would be coming home with us. Not before helping us load up the trailer with everything that would benefit us for the ever-approaching onset of winter. Joe began setting fire to each and every camper that sat on the grounds. As the fires began to rage, Darrell pulled the wagon with the 9 bodies behind the tractor as Joe and I followed closely behind in the Bronco with a trailer full of supplies. On my mother's 73rd birthday, I had kept my promise and would be home in time for breakfast with my girls, hoping the violence and death would decamp from us for the foreseeable future.